Is the rest of the city naked as far as fire protection is concerned? Or what was the condition? And I'm happy to advise you that we've got in Philadelphia a prearranged plan where we have a skip system that will be shown here shortly. And two, also, we have extra apparatus that is put into service, of course, with proper manpower at such time as we have such a big fire as this. And then, too, there are some companies in the city that have two pieces of equipment.
Yes. And
if both of those, as they do, respond to the fire and as early as is possible, we permit one of those companies to return. For instance, down at Engine 4, 15th and Sansom. One of those companies came back so that it covered the local situation while the fire was still on.
It's a real backup system.
Oh, yes. Then, too, also, as early as is possible from the fire, we return companies that may become available as soon as they can be spared, so that the entire town is wholly covered, and that if a fire should occur, and talking about if a fire should occur, 40 fires did occur during the time this fire was going on.
Chief, could you take us now back to the time? The first alarm was struck?
Yes, the first alarm bell was struck from box 95 at 12th and Susquehanna Avenue at 5:17 p.m.
And then?
And then the response to that original alarm was 4 engine companies, 2 ladder companies, and 2 battalion chiefs.
Yeah.
The fire was right here.
Right there.
Now, that is the first alarm response.
Then the second
Immediately
alarm.
on arrival, the battalion chief in charge ordered the second alarm at 5:19.
That was only 2 minutes later.
That is right.
Mm-hmm.
He responded from 7th and North, so just about a minute run, and he immediately asked for a second and a third alarm at 5:23.
It was pretty apparent that this was a sizable fire.
Yes, indeed.
The third alarm?
At 5:23.
Yes.
The Deputy Chief O'Drain, responding on the third alarm, on the second alarm, arrived and struck the fourth alarm at 5:29, which brought an additional 4 engine companies, a chief and a ladder. At 5:30, 1 minute later than the fifth alarm was struck.
And it's interesting to see the pattern of where this equipment is now coming from.
Yeah, you will notice, too, that some of the lights are out, and that is the bypass system which we inaugurated in the Philadelphia Fire Department. And I ordered the 6th and 7th alarms, 5:33 and 5:35, the 8th alarm and 9th alarm, 5:37, 5:59, and then the 10th alarm at 6:03. At this time, the fire was completely out of control. There was a firestorm developing, and it was then necessary to strike the 11th alarm at 6:21 and the 12th alarm at 6:28 p.m.
To further trace the story of this fire, we've come to the desk in the office of Deputy Fire Commissioner George Hay. Chief, when was it that you first heard about this fire?
I was notified I was at home, and I was notified that the second alarm was in for the Fretz building at 10th and Diamond. I advised him to send my driver that I was going to take it in.
Mm-hmm. And this Fretz building was not unknown to you, was it?
No, I worked as battalion chief in the 6th Battalion District for 12 years before I became chief of department, so that I was quite familiar with the Fretz building and its contents.
What was the building material? What was the building made of?
This was a red brick mill-type construction with wooden beams and wooden floors, many partitions, and with many occupancies, a good deal of them of hazardous nature. But it was the building itself that had put fear into the hearts of fire officials from the time of almost the time that it was constructed. It was a huge building, almost 2 squares long, and it was always considered a threat to the fire department. The only good part about the whole thing was that we knew that it was covered with sprinklers, adequately covered. We've had many alarms of fires in the building. Some of them multi-alarm fires, but with the aid of the sprinklers, we were always able to control the fires.
So you arrived on the scene not knowing whether you were really just going to get there and turn around and go home, or what was going to happen?
I ordinarily do not go on a second alarm, but I took this fire in because of the nature of the building. On arrival, it was, I knew that we had a major fire on our hands, and after a quick size-up and consultation with the assistant chief and the other chief officers present, why, we knew that we had a runaway fire. We knew we had a potential conflagration on our hands. When the walls started to fall, and this fireball, this firestorm developed, and this was a thing that put fear into the hearts of all of those present. The drafts, the updrafts of the air being sucked in, and the explosions as the fire developed, and the firestorm itself growing in intensity every minute, presaged what just did happen. We knew that something terrible was going to happen, and when the walls went in, it would have been then too late to evacuate large areas, and I'm afraid that we may have lost many lives if we hadn't been prepared for what did occur.
What is a firestorm? You've used that term several times.
This fire was of such great proportions that as fires do under these circumstances, they then create their own draft, and they draw in the cool air at the bottom, suck it up, and this seems to increase the intensity of the fire, so that a huge fireball develops, which rolls and which could very well, under certain conditions, come down closer to the earth, so that anything it touches, it will ignite. I feel sure that if there had been large buildings in that area, that they too would have been enveloped, because when this heat was so intense that we had buildings in back of us, to the rear of us, suddenly enveloped in flames spontaneously, so that we'd have to turn our deluge guns onto those buildings. And honestly, it's thrilling to think of how the officers and the men, the firemen worked. They worked without thought of their own safety. They gave everything they had. The spirit de corps was tremendous to be able to get through this without the loss of any lives. And of course, this is our purpose.
When these trucks do respond to an alarm, they're told to take up a position. They don't just come to the fire, and they're ordered to a specific area?
Thanks to radio, Bill, following the third alarm, I was able to direct the response of all of the companies coming in so that they could take advantage of the high-pressure system and then lead off with adequate water supply. And we had battalion chiefs then ready to meet them and place them into position. This building was a sprinklered building. And we did not know that the sprinkler system had been frozen and closed down. And I'll say this, Bill, had that fire occurred with a sprinkler system in operation, that might have been a 2 or a 3 alarm fire, but this great fire would not have occurred, so that we should take advantage of our fire protective equipment that's available to us, sprinkler systems, the proper kind of extinguishers, and the other things that are available to prevent fire or hold down the spread of fire. We shouldn't take them away, because fire is a dreadful thing, and it can cause much property loss and many lives and injuries. This shouldn't happen again.
Steaming, smoldering, charred ruins. Desolation. Stark remains of what once was. Dangerous remains of the Fretz building. was an 8-story factory. These were stores. This was a car. This was a street. And these were homes. Miraculously, no one was killed. But what saved the residents? And what will happen to them now?
And to try and bring you the full story, we've come to the offices of Water Commissioner Baxter, who is also the Emergency and Disaster Coordinator. Mr. Baxter, thank you very much for sharing your time with us. I know it's a very busy time for you. What was the beginning of this story as far as you were concerned?
Of course, the beginning of it was the start of the fire itself, and the fact that the fire had developed into a real major conflagration, and particularly that the fire had caused a lot of people to be evacuated from their homes, and later on some of those homes were destroyed.
Largely these people were your responsibility then, weren't they?
The people were my responsibility as a coordinator, although the overall operation is the assignment that actually has been given to me to coordinate and to direct where necessary all of the various functions. I would point out very hurriedly that from the standpoint of the various departments in the city, they all know what to do. I don't have to tell the fire chief or the police chief or any of these other people how to do their own individual job. They know how to do it. But the general coordination and particularly handling people who have to be evacuated from their homes is an assignment that I have.
Yeah. The police actually did the evacuation.
Getting the people out of their houses was done by the police and by some of the early firemen, of course, who were working directly at the fire.
What has happened now with these people who have been evacuated? What was the first thing that you did? These poor people saw their homes and their belongings either going up in flames or being so badly damaged as to not be able to inhabit them again. What became of these people?
One of the things we found, Bill, as far as people are concerned in fires of this sort, and we have fires, maybe 4 or 5 a year, in which a fair number of people are put out of their houses, that everybody wants to be looking at the fire while it's going on. It's very hard to collect them and get them together at the height of the fire. But in our overall organization for emergencies and disaster, we have used the Red Cross as the agency to take care of people, to house them, and to give them relief. In this case, sometime perhaps, I've lost track of the time, but perhaps within an hour after the fire started or after I got in there, we called the Red Cross and said this is an emergency area to get up and set up their emergency procedures. In this case, it was decided, all as a part of a prearranged plan, that we would put the people up at the Majestic Hotel at Broad and Girard Avenue. And I think that night, my recollection of the numbers are not exactly, may not be exactly correct, that we had somewhere between 35 and 40 rooms at the Majestic Hotel. Each room had at least 2 people in it, and depending on the size of the family or the number of children, there were more.
TV 10 reporter John Parsons visited some of the fire victims on the night of the fire to determine their impressions.
All right, Bruno? Well, how are things with you now?
Same way. Got nothing.
Where were you when the fire started?
I was in the house. In my house.
Did you have any insurance or anything on the house?
Yes, I did, but I left everything in there. I don't even as much know. I don't know nothing. Yes, I have insurance. Books that burn up. Don't know. We are so excited. We just don't know the name of the insurance. All excited with everything.
Is all of your family around the dinner table? Are you preparing the New Year's meal?
No, I hadn't started. I started to prepare it, but they wasn't around the table. They was in there undressing the tree.
How do they react?
They grabbed their things and they started to cry, some of them. They went outside, and we all went outside. So.
Did you manage to get anything out of the house before the fire?
No, nothing.
How many children in your family?
Well, I got a grown son and a grandson I'm raising. And me and my husband, 4 of us now. I don't know what we're going to do.
What were you doing when the news of the fire spread?
Well, I had done cooked my dinner and walked out. And I had went around a friend of mine. And when some of the kids, her kids run in and said the factory was on the fire. Then we rushed out, and I rushed down there, and I got there. My husband they had chased him out the house, and he didn't have no coat on or nothing, and so I had on what I'm got on now. That's all I saved. And so they wouldn't let us back around there. They wouldn't let us in. So there wasn't nothing to do. I went to the school, and they sent us to the school, and they sent us down here.
Okay. Where were you when the fire broke out?
I was in the house getting ready to go out to take the family for a drive. They'd already gone out and got in the car.
How'd they react to the news?
It excited them. And then I drove them away about 2 blocks, to get out where I figured it was safe.
Were you able to grab anything?
No, we didn't get anything other than just what we had on our back.
How many children in the family?
7.
How do you feel about the future right now?
I don't have much idea. It looks pretty rough.
Ebenezer Baptist Church has been designated as the Red Cross Center, and clothes have just been pouring in here for those who have been displaced because of the fire. This is the Reverend Spear, pastor of the Ebenezer Baptist Church. And could you tell us something about the number of clothes that have come in here?
More than 5,000 pieces of clothing have come in since the night of the disaster. And the people have been most responsive. While the headquarters is here, people of all walks of life have responded very, very, very well to the appeals. The Red Cross has its temporary quarters here, and we are gratified at the responses of all of the people of the community and the city. Chairman of our board, Benjamin Johnson and Robert Robinson, chairman of our trustee board, opened the church. I was out of the city when it happened. And since the night of the disaster, the church has been open for the victims.
With me at the table at the moment are Deputy Commissioner for Fire Prevention, William J. Eccles, and Battalion Chief Fire Marshal, William Connolly. Thank you, gentlemen, both, for being good enough to sit down. Let's explore this a little bit more, if we might. First of all, Commissioner Eccles, how do you go about investigating this type of a fire?
Well, Bill, you go about investigating this type of a fire similar to what you would investigate any other type of a fire. There's a starting point and many times we hope a closing point. In all fires, you start off by attempting to find out where the fire started, any witnesses or passers-by who observed the fire in its incipient stage, what they saw at that time. We talk to the first 2 firemen who were first on the scene, and they tell us what they observed. All of these things help us. We try to eliminate as much as we can accidental causes, and if we're able to, we then try to establish a motive for something other than an accidental fire. In this particular fire, we were fortunate in coming up with what we believe is a definite cause for the fire. We know exactly where the fire started from the conversations we had with the first-in firemen and their superior officers. We have eyewitnesses who observed the fire in its incipient stage and where the majority of the heavy fire was at the beginning. So from these things, we had a pretty good starting point.
We then talked to occupants of the building, neighbors in and around the area in the neighborhood, people who work in the building, and from this we were able to, what we think, establish a very solid, distinct, definite cause for this fire.
When do the fire marshals begin their investigation?
Immediately, all fire marshals are called immediately on extra alarm fires. The first alarm comes in, then the second alarm would come in. The fire dispatcher immediately notifies the assistant fire marshal on duty that night, plus notifying me. We immediately respond to the area where the fire occurred, and we immediately get into the investigation that quick.
Even while the blaze is going on?
That is correct.
Beginning your investigation?
That is correct.
In the interest of fire prevention, of course, the best fire is one that never starts, but after they get started, then you have to find out something about them.
It's important that we can establish a cause for a fire, Bill, because from the causes of fires that we established comes possible amendments and modifications to the existing fire code.
Yes. I know that there's just nothing but a mess of bricks up there at the moment. How did you piece together this information that you have, that you feel is reasonably certain as to how the fire started?
Well, I can start by saying that the area in which the fire originally started, strangely enough, was one of the few pieces of the building that was still standing. Two, we talked to the plant maintenance man who knew the building from top to bottom, knew it from memory from working in there. I would think that at this time that you might want to ask Fire Marshal Connolly just how he established the cause of this fire.
Yeah, Bill, how did you?
Well, immediately, like I told you that night, we responded to the fire and we worked there all evening. The next morning, we assigned 2 assistant fire marshals to that particular fire due to the extent of it. We found that there was 14 occupants in the building, the owner, the maintenance man. We've talked to them all, every one of them. We came up with 3 eyewitnesses that saw the fire start, and particularly the area that started in. Also, after talking to the maintenance man, we come up with a possible cause for this fire.
And what is that, may I ask?
Well, we come to the conclusion right at the present time, the maintenance man there had a series of breakdowns in his sprinkler system, and he went up into the penthouse of the elevator shaft. He had 2 15,000-gallon water tanks on the roof, and he went up there to close off the valves. While he was up there, he's a man that he claimed he was sick, and he took up a portable heater with him. And he attached it to the electric current of the elevator shaft. But he didn't plug it into a receptacle. He used just a makeshift hookup by taking it into the electric line and the ground line, and just to get warm. And he left it on there for approximately over 17 hours. And we definitely established that as the cause of the fire due to the fact that we picked up an eyewitness that saw where the fire had broken out. Also, when the 1st Battalion Chief arrived in there, he puts it in the same definite area that the portable heater had been attached to.
Gee. I think it's amazing that you're able to get this much information and get it so quickly.
It might be interesting, Bill, to tell you that this portable electric heater was placed on a splintered wooden floor, which was at the top of the elevator shaft, immediately underneath the 2 15,000-gallon water supply tanks for the sprinkler system. And that the headers abutting into this building abutted into the extending part of the other building, and it was a path, I guess, of an area about 2 feet in depth, I guess, through which this fire, once it started, from the heater being overheated, burning through this wooden floor, just transmitted itself through this air tunnel, you might call it, into the adjoining building, at which time it was a massive fire on the upper floors at the arrival of the firemen.
I think you 2 fellows and the entire fire department are to be congratulated for coming up with such a quick fix in such a short period of time.
Well, we tried. We've been working on it night and day, definitely since the fire started. And I might add this, that fire evidently was a delayed alarm. That probably was cooking up for quite some time before it did break out and was discovered by the eyewitnesses. And it was in the area where we had spoken about the eyewitnesses discovering it. And we had more than one eyewitness to the fact that the fire started in that area.
It's only through work, such as the fellows in the department, as you do, and by disseminating this information to the public at large, that we can help to prevent another Fretz fire. Perhaps the lesson to be learned is
expensively and yet not so dearly learned, since we lost no lives in the entire situation.
That's probably the most fortunate thing about an unfortunate fire, Bill.
Indeed so. No fire ever really has to happen, does it?
Well, there's no such thing as a good fire in the terms of the fire department. We like, as you said in the beginning, the best fire is the one that doesn't occur, and that's what we try to do. We're not always successful, but that's what we try to do.
Good. Thanks to both of you.
Thank you.